Hey everybody, Jacob here at /played, and I hope this video finds you well. It feels like we're living in the age of the video game remake, and I have mixed feelings about that. And I'm still trying to figure out if this is a problem or a total non-issue. Maybe it's even something to be excited about. So I wanted to make this video and just kind of think out loud with you guys and talk through the finer points in the comment section, because what better, healthier place to have a productive conversation than a YouTube comment section. Timestamps for the video are available in the description if you want to jump around. But let's dive right into this and start by describing what the issue or problem is. First and foremost, it's important to clarify at the beginning, I'm talking exclusively about AAA gaming here and what it's releasing or not releasing, as the case may be. And lately, it feels like I just keep seeing announcements for or reviews of the latest video game remake, or in some cases, the remaster. As I'm recording this video in July 2026, for example, Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced just came out and sold 3 million copies, and the Halo Campaign Evolved remake is releasing soon as well. Bethesda just announced remasters for Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3, and last month Capcom announced the remake of Resident Evil Code Veronica, while Nintendo announced the remake of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And then earlier this year, I think it was February, the original God of War trilogy remake was announced, and I'm sure you can fill in the blank here with other remakes or remasters that have released within the past 5 years or that have upcoming release dates. Part of this, of course, is because there's just been so many gaming anniversaries for iconic games and franchises lately, so it makes sense that, you would kind of capitalize on those anniversaries by reissuing games or having remakes and remasters. But even in the absence of those anniversaries, still feels like there's a lot of remakes and remasters being announced. And while I think it's safe to assume that original games still make up the majority of AAA releases and remakes or remasters constitute only a small number, remakes are clearly low-risk investments with potential for high returns, and it doesn't seem like much of a stretch to predict that as more remakes are released and sell very well, it incentivizes AAA publishers to continue investing in and making remakes rather than taking the risk on creating innovative and original games or franchises. I don't want to get into any slippery slope fallacies or doomsday scenarios here, but it feels easy to imagine a future where the annual gaming release calendar is filled with remakes and remasters, basically going through the last couple of console generations and re-releasing the best-selling titles at full price and probably without any physical discs. I guess my biggest concern here from the purely gaming consumer side of things is that it feels like we are just being fed expensive leftovers, and it also feels like AAA gaming, with all its money and resources, is either out of ideas or are maybe too scared to invest in original, premium, single-player, narrative-driven games. I mean, clearly they're not scared to invest in the development of live service multiplayer games, even though the track record there hasn't been, great.
The crew is gathering. Would you like to join us for game night?
But every time I see the announcement for a remake or a remaster, I'm wondering where the next generation of video game icons are. Where's the next Mario, Sonic, Kratos, Lara Croft, or Zelda? And I realize you don't just sit down one day and create like a generational entertainment icon that spawns an entire franchise that lasts, decades. But lately it feels like there's a drought, and all AAA publishers have is the past, this reliable roster of video game brands that have endured for decades that they can repack and resell. For all the money these AAA publishers have, they feel bankrupt in terms of imagination and ideas. In this way, I can't help but feel concerned, or at least reasonably skeptical, about the future of video games in terms of creativity and original experiences. Again, referring here to the AAA side of things and not indie games or even AA studios. And it's worth pointing out here, right, like this issue or concern I'm describing isn't unique to games. You see versions of this for all modern media, including the movies, where folks are concerned Hollywood has run out of ideas and only has nostalgia to work with, nothing but endless reboots, remakes, sequels, and prequels to old franchises. Also, historically and generally speaking, it seems to be the case that if you wanted something new and innovative, you would look to independent musicians, filmmakers, and game developers, where creativity, innovation, and personal vision typically take precedence over profit, at least at the beginning. This has likely always been the case and will continue to be, and it's why most of the games I play these days or am interested in tend to be from indie developers or smaller studios, even if doing that and saying saying that makes me feel like a dirty video game hipster. Personally and selfishly, I want to have new gaming experiences and not just keep re-experiencing old games, even if they do look and play better than the originals. I want to feel inspired. I want to be excited about what's next rather than having my gaming collection sold back to me in 4K, but without a disc and maybe with an in-game store to sell microtransactions and ask me for even more money. Now, I can already hear the person in the comment section saying, well, if you don't like remakes, then don't buy them. No one's asking you to buy them. But to be clear, though, despite everything I just said, I don't actively dislike or refuse to buy remakes. I think Capcom is an example of producing high-quality remakes I enjoy while still being capable of releasing a quality original single-player IP like Pragmata or quality new entries in their existing franchises. Capcom at least seems to be more dedicated to premium narrative-driven single-player games than other AAA studios, so when they release a remake, I'm usually happy to pick it up. Remakes can be great and a lot of fun, with the potential to be their own distinct gameplay experiences that separate themselves from the original, and they're just, more than a surface level improvement of the first game. And for me, the biggest argument in favor of more remakes and remasters, or at least keeping things the way they are, is that, in my opinion, video games are unique and that they benefit from remakes and remasters more than any other medium does. Sure, you can re-release an older movie in theaters and in 4K, punch up the visuals and the sound, but because of the nature of games as an interactive medium that we play and inhabit, and because of advances in game development and technology, the older a game is, the more dramatic and noticeable the improvements in a remake are likely to be, going beyond just graphics and visual fidelity and actually changing how immersive the game world feels, how enjoyable and responsive and fluid the gameplay experience is. You can even argue that remakes can represent the fulfillment of a game's original vision, allowing it to achieve and become what it would have been originally had the technology and resources been available. It doesn't mean the original game is bad by any means, but I think you can justify a remake so long as there's a big enough technological and gameplay gap between the original release and the remake. It's this time difference or a chronological gap that helps the remake feel substantial and necessary, rather than just a cash grab. But by remaking older titles and releasing them on new hardware, the other argument in favor of remakes is that they become easily accessible and known to a new generation of gamers, which, of course, that's great. But this is where I also can't help but be pulled back into my cynicism, my suspicion, of all these remakes. The next generation of gamers argument, I think, works both ways. Yes, it's great that they get to experience these old releases as remakes with all the modern improvements, but don't future generations deserve their own icons and video game franchises? And by the way, I'm happy just to be the old, guy who's just totally out of it, has no idea what the hell he's talking about. So please remind me of all the major releases I'm missing and all the latest and greatest gaming icons I've overlooked, but it still feels at least like the next generation is just getting the warmed up gaming leftovers, and that kind of sucks. And can we just acknowledge that playing some of these older games is worth it? Like, can we take a moment to recognize and honor how great many of these original games were? Maybe also agree that not every rough edge needs to be smoothed over, that some gameplay jank, some cheesy dialogue, blocky graphics can actually enrich an experience rather than detract from it, provided you go in with the right mindset and expectations. That, maybe some of these older console generations represent a timeless gaming aesthetic that's not only worth preserving, but maybe even bringing back in certain cases. Does everything need to be modernized and get a makeover, subjected to some marketing side-by-side comparison that shows you just how crappy and primitive the original was, and how groundbreaking and special the latest $80 remake is? There's like this implicit assumption that all old games suddenly need new graphics and gameplay refinements or modern gameplay experiences. And I don't know, maybe there's an argument to be made just to leave these games alone, let them exist in their own time period and their own technology, and stop trying to force them to be this contemporary modern object with all the shiny bells and whistles. Because honestly, I've recorded this whole video with the assumption that these are all high quality remakes that are coming out. We're not even getting into the potential issues remakes bring up in terms of how they can potentially compromise the integrity of the original game, or even tarnish its legacy if the remake isn't done well and with care, or if it oversteps in terms of how much of the original game it tries to change or reinvent. If you are around to play the original and suddenly someone appears and promises to make it better, in my book, it's a reasonable reaction to think they might be full of it.
You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Believe me, I know.
What was that all about?
Ultimately, this doesn't have to be a binary decision. You can have both remakes and new original games and franchises. There's a market for both, and plenty of consumers willing to spend their money on a good remake and an original single player experience that promises something new and fresh. Honestly, I think I've just reached an interesting age and point in my life where it's weird to suddenly see every corporation and brand in sight trying to sell you back your childhood. I went from actually being young to being sold on the idea of how great it was to be young. Every generation gets to a point where a large majority are trying to buy back their youth, retread old memories, and share them with their kids or grandkids. Corporations, of course, recognize the profit potential for this nostalgia, and they're always happy to capitalize on it. I mean, what's more precious to us than our memories? And there's always somebody that's happy to sell them back to you. I just have never wanted to be either the desperate old guy trying to fit in with the young crowd, but also never wanted to become the grumpy old fart who just can't stop reminiscing about the past, the good old days, how much better his music was, his TV shows were, and on and on. But you know what? I'm finding it increasingly difficult to not be the grumpy old fart. I genuinely want the new games to be better than the ones I grew up with. I'd love to see a new generation of gaming icons and franchises that can challenge what I grew up with. Instead, much of the AAA gaming landscape feels somehow worse, emptier, just a bit tired. For now, while the AAA studios are busy remaking the classics, I still have the originals, plenty of masterpieces I missed the first time around, so I'll be busy playing through my backlog, and I can promise you that it's more than enough. But anyway, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time. You take care, be well, and have an awesome rest of your day.